I'm Hella Rader, and in this episode of The Stories That Sparkle, I'm joined by Shyama, who shares about how thinking she was going to die changed everything, how she practices medicine, who she lives with, and how she sees herself. Shyama also shares about why she uses a perspective borrowed from astronauts to look back on her life without regrets. This conversation was a real eye-opener for me, and I cannot wait to have Shyama back as a guest. So I invite you to get comfortable, sit back, and listen in. I'm Hella Rader. With a good sense of humor, an open heart, and an open mind, I love to explore the very human complexities in others and in myself. That's why I created a space for women you have never heard of and could easily pass on the street to share in their own voices the intricacies of starting over in life, building community, inhabiting their bodies, and more. Welcome to our Disco Ball, the stories that sparkle.
There's a little sign out there. Slopes.
It says Mama's Way.
Mama's Way.
Yeah. It's my little garden I made in honor of my mom. She was a big gardener.
Oh.
So, yeah. Well, welcome, Shyama.
Thank you, Hella.
Or Dr. Rosenfeld.
Shyama's good.
We'll go with Shyama. This is informal. Yes.
Yes.
We're sitting here, everybody, in the sunroom, and I'm here with Shyama, who, yes, is a medical doctor, but we're not going to talk just medical today. We're going to talk change.
Okay.
Because that's what this is all about. So, because you've had a lot of change.
Yes.
So in a pretty short amount of time, if I have that right.
Somewhat. It was coincided with COVID.
Oh, right.
So COVID was a time of change for everybody, good and bad. And this is only, in hindsight, I see the sequence of events for me in my life. I was working in the COVID clinic that Valley Health opened in April of 2020. Mm-hmm. COVID started here, like January was the first case in the US, and then by March things were starting to shut down. So Valley Health opened a COVID clinic, and I started working there. So you start to hear all these devastating stories of people that are coming in, that are losing loved ones, etc. And then I got hospitalized in October of 2020, before the vaccine came out. And even though I was never in the ICU, I can tell, looking back on texts that I sent during that period of time, that I thought I was going to die. And so I was at a very low place, even though I was living at that time with my husband and our youngest of 3 children, our youngest son. But when you got COVID, you had to isolate from everybody. So I was in a bedroom by myself. And, one night I felt so bad that I called the surgeon on call and asked if I could have an acute abdomen. Another night I felt so bad that I climbed out the window and drove myself to the ER, wow, thinking that maybe they would give me some medicine or some fluid or something, and they sent me home. And then finally, after 10 days of illness, I was still having a fever, so I called my colleagues at the COVID clinic, and they said they would do another x-ray on me. And on my way, I pulled over and I texted one of the infectious disease doctors, Connie Smith, and I told her my symptoms, and she said that I should meet her in the emergency room. And she said, "Don't worry, Shyama, we got this," with a heart emoji. And I could tell, I realized how low I was feeling at that point, because I had pulled over and I was starting to cry, just the relief of knowing somebody was going to help me.
Right.
And so then I got admitted, I had a pneumonia, and I was there for 4 days, and then I came out. And when I got out of the hospital, I was literally held, the only 2 emotions I could experience were love and gratitude. And it was unlike anything I had experienced that I remember. Everywhere I looked, whoever I looked at, I was just grateful for them, and I could only feel an emotion of love. And I thought to myself, if this stays with me for the rest of my life, regardless of whether there's imperfect relationships or other stressors, I would be fine.
Right, right.
But unfortunately, that did not last.
It did. That pink cloud burst.
It burst.
The bubble burst.
Damn it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know. It's funny when life just moves on. You forget. The things. Those moments are easy to forget.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Kind of like after you've have a car accident, you're so conscious and aware, and then gradually that fades, and you go back to some of our careless habits. But so that happened to me, and I think even though I came out of that pink haze, I still was left with this changing moment, in the sense that changing mindset, because I believed I could have died. And so whether or not that was based in actual fact, it doesn't matter, because my mind perceived it that way. Mm-hmm. And so things did change in my life. And I think that was the beginning of it.
And is that when you changed the model of your practice? Or did that start before that moment?
That would have started around the same time, because coincidentally, I had a 5-year contract with Valley Health, and that was ending April of 2021. So I knew I had to decide what I wanted to do, whether I wanted to sign back up and continue as an employed physician, or whether I wanted to go back out on my own. And I was with Valley Health 2016 to 2021, but prior to that, I was doing my own practice for like about 15 years. It was a traditional family practice that that got big and got busy and had multiple providers. So there wasn't as much of the personal care, and there was a lot of administrative things, and that's one of the reasons why I sold it to Valley Health. So I knew I had to make a decision. And so I thought about the things that I enjoyed in medicine, and I was able to narrow it down to maybe 3 big things. And one was the relationships I could develop with the patients I saw, and another was solving problems, whether that problem is, what's causing my abdominal pain, or how can I get this medication so it's affordable. No matter what the problem, it's kind of challenging and fun to solve it. And then the third was I enjoyed being in the hospital. I enjoyed seeing people, not that I want people to be in the hospital, but I enjoyed taking care of people in that setting as well. And so I thought that by creating a smaller practice, I could do those things for a smaller group of people, and it would be something that was sustainable. Because in medicine nowadays, no matter what our specialty, there's a huge amount of provider burnout. And so the pace that we work at, the demands, it just doesn't seem sustainable. And I think
like the quotas of see so many people in this amount of time,
and yet keep your patient satisfaction scores high, and all your bonuses are tied to all of that. And so I think the cost, one of the costs of our system, is that it's not sustainable for providers. If you want to have mental and physical and family well-being, it's just really not sustainable.
If you want to have a life, it's easy to forget or not think about is the provider. Because I'm coming in from my health and I'm scared, or I'm upset, or I'm whatever I am, and I'm not thinking about the other person in that moment for sure. And I'm certainly not even big picture, even if I'm doing fine. Always thinking about this person also has a life and a family to go home to, and what's this like for them?
And you shouldn't have to think about that, because there are times in our life, like when you're feeling sick, that you can focus that attention on yourself. And I think this is something that medicine has to figure out and evolve to. I would love if my model, if it was sustainable, could be the way healthcare is. We each have our little pod of patients, of people, and we move with them through life. You know, whether they're getting married, divorced, getting a devastating diagnosis, whether they can't leave the house and you have to see them there, or they get hospitalized. It's your pod, and you move with them. Because I feel like naturally the care you provide improves the better you know the person. Because a lot of times in medicine, I think women especially get discounted a little bit. Like we've seen biases. We know that there's biases that are racially based, biases that are based on gender, and probably even on age. And so sometimes a female patient of mine might go to an emergency setting and complain about chest pain. But often for a woman, it may be relegated to like anxiety or something.
Yeah, you don't have chest pain, you're just stressed out.
Yes, or your chest pain is coming from anxiety.
Right, you just need to calm down.
You need to calm down, you know? So there, I mean, there are these biases that happen. And so I think that when you know that person, you know, yes, she might be anxious, but she never calls me with chest pain. Just it gives a different flavor. Or a patient is in the hospital that's scared, they will ask me, you know, should I get this heart catheterization? And I'm thinking, I'm not your cardiologist. I mean, they know what the cardiologist knows what they're talking about, but they just want the assurance that somebody is advocating for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I love this model, but
well, let's talk a little bit about what the model is, because I don't think I kind of interrupted you earlier when I made it about the poor doctors. No one thinks about them, but I just I think it's a good point that we don't think about the system being unsustainable for the providers as much as it really isn't working so well for the patients either. So it's kind of not working for anybody.
Yes,
but I don't often. I, as a non-doctor, I don't think about that side of the lack of sustainability.
Yes.
So you have opted for a very different model than the traditional practice model.
So the system works I believe, for health insurance companies.
Right.
So it seems to work well for them.
It really does. Yeah, they're winning. Hashtag winning.
Hashtag at the cost of everybody else.
Right.
So my model is that I charge a membership fee that is separate from what you pay when you come for each visit. So that membership fee allows me to not be volume dependent.
Right.
And that's why it's not a sustainable model, because everybody can't afford to pay a membership fee on top of what we already pay for health insurance and premiums and deductibles and co-pays. So that's the model. Right.
Yeah. And that allows you, I mean, I love it because I can come in for my annual appointment, if not more, and every time I get an hour of your time.
Yes.
Basically. Yeah. When we chat about all kinds of other things.
Yes.
Than what's physically going on. I mean, that too.
Yes.
But also other things.
Yeah. So we don't feel as rushed as in a traditional practice. Yeah. So that change was happening because my contract with Valley Health was ending, and one of my longtime mentors in medicine was a internist, Vikin Kalbian, who had started a internal medicine practice in town before I even got here, then had retired and hired the first nephrologist to this town, kidney specialist, and then retired from that practice. And when I was opening, he still wanted to practice medicine. And so he called me and said, can I come and work there? One of the nurses he had known was going to be starting with me. Can I come and work with you for a day a week or 2 days a week? And maybe he was in his late 70s, early 80s then. And so he did. And he was such an amazing physician that there was actually one family driving from North Carolina to come and see him here.
Wow.
Yes. So, and he continued to practice till in his 90s. And he loved medicine. Like, I would sit at conferences with other older senior physicians, and, you know, they would just talk about how disappointing the system was, and how stressful it was compared to when they started practice. Mm-hmm. Whereas Dr. Calbian was always just about the medicine.
Oh, interesting.
So we would talk about cases. We would go to conferences at the hospital together, and regardless of the list of credentials that the speaker had, he would look at me and say, "What was your pearl?" Aww. And if I say, "Oh, I don't really know if I had any," he goes, "Exactly. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how qualified the person was. If they could not give you a nugget of valuable clinical data, then it wasn't that helpful."
Yeah, like if you didn't walk away going, that made me think about something different, or
I learned.
Looked at it in a new way, or oh wow.
Yes.
It's like, I love that, because I think so much, you know, I had someone on, we talked about, when we're talking about menopause, and one of the topics we sort of got into for various reasons was also advocating for yourself.
Yes.
And, you know, asking questions of your doctor, you know, and I think, I know for me, for a long time, I just, you know, was like, well, they're the one wearing the lab coat.
Yes.
It was like a signifier to me, like, I know, and you don't, so you can't ask me. And it just, whether that was true or not, or they thought that or not, that's how it made me feel.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't, for many years, ask questions. Or press on, like, I don't know, that doesn't feel right to me. I don't know, I'm not so sure. But that, you know, I think some of that's just, the older I get, the easier it becomes to
advocate
for myself in general, and to speak up in general. But yeah, this illusion of like, they're the expert, so I need to defer wholeheartedly.
Yes.
But to your point, just because someone has all the credentials doesn't always mean they have the best information for me.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I think that perception that clinicians now have, are the keeper of knowledge, is now very far from the truth. It might have been like maybe a generation ago, but now, because information is so readily available, even from good sources, that a patient you could come in and be more of an expert on, you know, heart disease or, you know, thyroid disease than I am. So I think now, in the primary care setting, our role is more as an advocate. So sometimes people come in with a concept, and they might have already based on their research, diagnosed themselves with something.
Right.
And my job is sometimes to kind of take them through a logical progression of their symptoms to the diagnosis, and sometimes talking people off of a ledge or that kind of thing. Right. So, but if somebody has a known diagnosed disease and they want to research it and understand it and know where people are doing cutting edge research on that, they would definitely know more than what I could tell them.
Right. Yeah.
So, but then we have to kind of work together to figure out, you know, either how to get them to one of those research centers, or get them in a clinical trial, or all the other possibilities, to try a medicine that's suggested, those kind of things.
Yeah, I do appreciate that about you, because I can come in and be like, I read the blah, blah, and I did this, and I'm doing this other thing. And you're like, okay, well, let's talk about, like, tell me more. Tell me more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me more. So I think medicine can be a much more collaborative space than it perhaps has been previously.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of clinicians would be very interested in doing that. But if you have 15 minutes to see somebody or 20 minutes to see someone, there's only so much collaboration you can do. You have to kind of listen to the story, do a brief exam, and create a plan and be out so that you can get to the next person.
Right.
That's the
oof. And that
difficulty.
I would imagine that, you know, I mean, people don't get into medicine just for the hell of it. I mean, they're getting into it, I'm assuming, or I would assume, because they want to care for people and help them feel better.
Yes.
fundamentally.
Yes.
And so I would imagine that's a hard knowing, like, I want to spend more time here, but I can't.
Yeah, it is very much.
Yeah. To that whole, like, the stressors involved
Yeah.
of that, being unsustainable.
I spoke to a young surgeon recently who was feeling burned out because they wanted to be able to see all the patients that needed their care, needed their help, but it was not sustainable. They couldn't do it. And so there's a guilt that goes with that. I'm already working, not me, but in other people's case, I'm already working 5 days, 4.5 days, half a day is maybe administration, and I'm doing surgery 2 days a week, and they've already got 35 patients on my schedule, but there's still more waiting to be seen, and complaining that they're getting booked out far.
Right.
But you're already leaving your children and your family at maybe 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning. I'm not sure what time everybody's leaving, and then getting home maybe at 6 or 7.
Right.
And
you have paperwork to wrap up.
Yeah, you're too tired to really engage in a worthwhile way. And I think till now, like in many professions, we do it because it's necessary and people ahead of us did it. It's kind of the concept of residency, where they would make you stay up 48 hours, 72 hours, and somehow because the senior doctors went through that, you should also do that. It was not good for them, and it definitely is not good for you. So
Right.
It doesn't make sense to perpetuate things that are not helpful. And in practice, sometimes the same thing happens. You look at the role models around you, and you say, okay, well, that was a female clinician with children, and they somehow managed to do this. I should be able to
I
too.
should be right, but who knows if how she was feeling about that?
Yes, exactly. And no two people are ever the same, and no two environments are ever the same. No matter how much on the outside we want to compare ourselves to someone else, it just isn't. It's not useful, and it's not beneficial. But I think what I'm noticing in younger clinicians and younger people that I see that are in other fields is that they're coming out of training with a much more intentional outlook of how to balance work and personal life. And I don't know whether they will be successful because they're coming into pre-existing models and frameworks that are not looking at that and are not looking at well-being and family, and or not looking at it as much as necessary. But maybe they're going to force the change.
I was reading an article in The Economist about how Gen X is all about work-life balance
Yes.
and autonomy.
Yes.
And that's us, Gen
Yes.
X. But we don't get talked about very much, Gen X. And everybody sort of like puts this whole like work-life balance thing on millennials or younger.
Yes.
Oh, they're trying to change all the things.
Yes.
And the boomers are very upset. But I'm like, yeah, but us Gen Xers here in the middle are
I
actually the pivot point.
Okay, good point.
Because we're like, yeah, not maybe all of us, but we're like, yeah, I don't know that I agree with this
Yes.
one way of doing things. What if
Yeah.
I do it my other way over here?
Yeah.
But that I still feel that certainly this push into like, but that's not how you're supposed to do it, or you should do it differently.
Yes.
And then when I've had discussions with people like, oh, these millennials, and I'm like, actually, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to.
Yes.
They're challenging the status quo.
Yes.
And they're saying, what if there's another way?
Yes.
What if we do it differently?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be worse? Why does that mean it's going to be worse? It's just new.
It's just new.
You're just uncomfortable because it's different.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it worse.
Yeah.
And I'm like, right, you
Yeah.
go, young people.
Yes.
I'm like, you go, lead the charge. And I'm like, wait, but also us people, us Gen Xers.
Yes.
We need to get some more of our voices out here.
Yes.
To be like, no, we're good with the change. Please.
Yeah.
Bring it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting that I didn't give our generation maybe as much credit as I should, that we have been pushing.
Yeah, we haven't, but in a very quiet way. It was kind of the point. I mean, this wasn't necessarily the point of the article, but it made me think like, well, it's very like us because we're the whole like, don't sell out generation. And like, that's a bad thing to like be an artist and make money, for example, or whatever. Somehow that was a thing in the 90s or whatever. Like, oh, no, don't do that. So I think we are pushing it, but very quietly. And nobody hears about it.
Yeah.
Because we don't get out there.
But just like, I guess, just like me doing this practice and many other clinicians, interestingly, specifically women that I know in our community, I'm the 5th non-traditional practice in just Winchester.
Wow, and it's a small town.
And it's a small town.
This is a town, just for everyone's reference, of like maybe 26,000 people.
Yes, and so just in that town, I'm the 5th non-traditional practice. So clearly, we have been trying, and they are about my age, so we have been trying to redefine the parameters that we're working in.
Right.
So that's true.
So actually brings up another question I have, because I mean, you're from India. Were you born in India?
So
were you born here?
I was born in India and came here when I was about 5 years old. Yeah, and then my I have an older sister and a younger brother, and my father was a civil engineer, and my mother stayed at home. She taught a little bit and then stayed at home and did different jobs, but my father wanted to travel overseas, and so we came here when I was about 5, and then maybe a few years later he got a job with an American company and started to move to Sudan. So then we lived in Sudan for a year, and then we were about to. I think my sister might have been. So I was maybe in 3rd grade. My sister was starting high school, and so he wanted her to be in one place. So he sent the both of us to boarding school in India.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So they were in Africa, and we were in boarding school in India. Then he moved to. And his contracts might have been like 2 years at a time. So if he was going to move in the middle of a school year, he wanted us to have more stability. So then from Sudan, he moved to Saudi Arabia. Then I came back to Saudi Arabia and did a year of schooling there. Then he moved to Nigeria. So then I went back to boarding, and then I came back to Nigeria to do school for a year. Then we came back to the US for 1 year. Then we moved to Egypt. And then I went back, I did school there for a year, then I went back to boarding school for a few more years, and then they moved to Oman.
Oh my God.
And then they came back.
Your whole life has been change.
Yes.
Constant
Yes,
change.
constant
It's like
change.
a constant motion. Wow.
But I loved that. Just the living in different cultures, and you're right, it is change, and it's a, with change comes kind of maybe like adaptability and resilience, and so it's like change is a little bit of a hurdle that you have to overcome, but as you overcome it, you're developing more resilience. So I kind of look at it like that, and then we came back for my senior year of high school, and then I stayed here through college and med school and residency, and.
So how was the change for you to be really more in one place for a long time? Because you've been here for a long time.
Been here. This is the longest I've lived anywhere in my whole life.
Wow.
Is Winchester. I mean, it's good when I'm doing a private practice. Obviously, it's very useful.
Right.
But I think I enjoyed the adventure of change more. But as I get older, I do like some of the familiarity and the routines. But if you create personal routines, then you could be anywhere and have that continued routine of whether it's yoga or meditation or reading or certain volunteer work, things like that, or hiking. All of that can be the constant amidst other change.
One of my plans is definitely to be on the road and recording stories and these conversations with women all over the country.
Oh, honey.
I was talking to somebody who does a lot of traveling, and she was saying the same thing, like, well, just be consistent about some of those routine things. And that kind of smooths out the, like, being in a different place.
Yes. Yeah.
on a constant
changes.
basis. Yeah, all the other changes sort of like are more manageable because you're keeping consistent with these other things.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, good to know.
That's a good point.
So that's one big change. And then I think there's been a few other big changes along the way.
Yes. So having COVID, getting hospitalized, coming out, having a new appreciation for my life, starting the new practice. Then, as I got through those changes, then addressing issues that we had had. My ex-husband, and I had over the years. We were married like 25 years at that point, and we had been through counseling, and I was volunteering giving COVID vaccines, and there was a nurse and another doctor next to me, and the nurse told me about a therapist that she had gone to, and said she credited that woman with saving her marriage. So I thought, oh my goodness. So God or divinity put me in that place so I could be next to her so she could tell me this story.
Right.
That's what I was here for. So then I called that therapist and I made an appointment, and I talked to my ex, and I was like, hey, I made this appointment, and you have to fill out this paperwork. And so he said fine, but then he really wasn't filling out the paperwork. And so then I thought, I don't necessarily need to, maybe I shouldn't be trying to change somebody else, So I said to him, if you don't want to go, I called the office and they will just change the appointment to just an individual therapy for me. So that's fine. I said, I don't want to necessarily try to change you. You like who you are, be you. But would you consider maybe taking a little medicine for something?
Right.
So it was kind of probably a little hypocrisy, because I'm like, okay, we don't need to change by therapy, but could you change with some drugs instead? I'll take either option. And he kind of yelled and was like, no, I'm not doing that. And it's no different than a conversation we've had multiple times before. But for whatever reason, I received it in a very clear way that this is my life. He is not going to change. And that's fine. I can accept it and be happy and move on, or I have to make a change. And even though we had been in that scenario multiple times before, the clarity for me had never been there. And this time it was. And so in my mind, it kind of clicked. And then I decided, no, I could have died 6 months or 7 months ago. And so if I'm still here and this is the one life I have, then one life on this earth that I have, then I want to do it differently. And so then on my work computer, I started composing a letter, because this is how I operate.
Right.
So like a Dear John letter.
I relate to this. Let me write you a letter.
Yes, let me write you a letter. Let me try to be as kind as possible in the letter. Right. Let me say all the good things about you. Let's keep it good. And so, so then by July, I think I shared the letter with him, and it was hard, obviously, for him, and we still had a 14-year-old at home. And then he wrote me a letter. It was very kind, and then we kind of figured it out. He realized that I was not really changing my mind. This is kind of, I had come to this conclusion, and so then we started figuring out, the practical side of it, and then in my mind, I thought, well, perhaps if I'm not tied by the bonds of marriage, and if I was financially independent, that maybe we would come together more as equals than we had till now. But, and so we were still living together. And so we continued to live together through like another 6 or 8 months. But our patterns of behavior seemed to be pretty well established, and it wasn't really changing.
Well, that was my experience.
Yeah.
After 20 years, I'm like, yeah, I could wish for this to be different,
Yes.
but I know I'm going to fall right back into, it's not even about him. I will fall right back into a way of being.
Yes.
That it's just been too long.
Yes.
I guess.
And maybe it's too long, and maybe it's also our natural mode of existing is, which I think you can be critical of, which is kind of a flexibility, and you can be self-critical about that and think, oh, well, maybe if I was firmer from the beginning, saying this is what I draw the line in the sand, this is what I need, this is what I want. Like a lot of friends I know are able to do that. But then on the flip side, I think about like some Zen teachings where they talk about being like water,
right,
or being like the reed that can bend and flex in the wind, and so that helped me develop more of an admiration for my natural way of being.
I see. Got
which
it.
is to be flexible, which is often to adapt. Because that can look like, from one perspective, that can look like a weakness, but from another perspective, that's resilience. So you can choose to see it in different ways, and maybe in different settings it can be more in one way than the other.
I don't have to, I don't have to get hard to take care of myself.
No.
I can be soft.
Yes.
And still take care of me.
Yes.
And still say what I need to say and do what I need to do. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't require of me to have to get all hard and inflexible.
Yes.
And almost borderline recalcitrant.
Yes.
And like defiant, which is my other go-to.
Yes.
I'm like, I will fight you with sheer force of defiance. Like, I will stand here like a brick wall. I will not budge. It's like, I can do that. I'm like, I can stand here all day long and stand off.
Yes.
I can do a standoff all day long. No problem.
Yeah.
Or I could just stay soft and not consider it a weakness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the words that, like, I like the words that you used in the previous podcast when you talked about how you had been existing in that paradigm for so long that changing it was difficult, even though even like for me, even though marriage bonds weren't there. But I think even the words that we use to describe ourselves are important. Like when we say hard and soft, it could both be negative, but soft is often viewed as negative. It may just be our perception of it. Versus if you say rigid or flexible or inflexible, like you said, so it's just different. But so I realized that our patterns were fairly well established and was not really changing. So then we decided that we would live separately and try to maintain a friendship, but which is then a whole nother issue, because then that comes to boundaries and learning how to keep boundaries, and that's a learning for me.
Yeah, that was a journey for me. There was several years of like, we'll be friends, because there's an element here, like, for all of the difficulties and all of the things that, in the years since I was able to finally get real about that were going on and that were not okay with me, and, all that stuff, and really own it in a whole new way. At the same time, this is a person who's been in my life for 22 years.
Yeah.
If you include the 2 years before we get married, it's very difficult. It's very murky then, because I'm like, I don't want to, there's too many lines here now that are getting easily crossed.
Yes. And often for the other person's advantage.
Right.
But I think it's about four years now, and I think we've hopefully kind of figured out, at least I've figured out what seems to be working well for me.
It's important to remember that it takes time.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to know what this change is going to mean for me. So, like, what was okay, what I thought would be okay with me in 2020 when it started, turned out to not be okay with me by 2024.
Yeah.
Because everything had changed.
Yes.
Like, my environment had changed. The world had changed. I mean, everything was different.
Yeah.
So, like, oh, right. Like, I have come through something if I'm evolving still.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's just changed for me. It's no longer actually going to work for me to have a relationship here.
Yeah. And I think marriage is such a difficult thing, and everybody has to navigate it for them, the way that works for them. There's very few marriages that I have observed that are a true partnership, where each is supporting the other and uplifting the other, and each's wishes and hopes and dreams are held up in equal value. But the ones that are less than ideal partnerships, people are still in it for different reasons. And coming from an Indian culture,
right?
So after education, from my family and my extended family, after education, being married is the next highest goal.
Well, I was going to say, that must have been a factor here too, like both in what you've chosen professionally and the drive to be educated, and because that's a very also immigrant family thing for sure.
Yes, like a first generation.
Yeah, if you're listen, it's on you. You have all the options I didn't have. I mean, that's how my mom was.
Yes.
And fair. Yeah. She had no options.
Yeah.
So I respect that, and I admire and appreciate. But as a kid, all I could hear was push, and this is what you have to do. I'm like, but that's not all of who I am.
Yes.
So I mean, it's a whole other episode at some point. But so yeah, definitely, the education piece was like numero uno.
Yeah.
So so then culturally for you, there's also this. I mean, marriage was less of a thing with my mom and dad for me so much.
Yes.
It was less like of a pressure. But
for us, it's a for people of Indian descent, it's a high pressure. I mean, to the point that as soon as I finished residency, my mother was on it. Once I said, okay, yes, you can look for a husband for me, because they still try to do an arranged marriage. She took out an ad in Times of India and India Abroad with my age, my caste in the Hindu system. Even though caste is outlawed, people still know by name what our caste is. My Indian horoscope.
Wow.
My profession, and U.S. citizen. Those are the only 5 things you need. I was inundated with offers. Nobody cared what I looked like, nothing.
Wow, I love it. I had all the offers you could imagine.
Yes.
I love that.
So then I come home with a young man who's not Indian, not an engineer or a doctor, not my horoscope clearly.
Right.
And it's a different culture, different religion, everything.
Wow, just different all over,
different
across the
all
board.
around. Yeah. So I think,
Shyama, you go big or you go home, right?
Yes,
You're like, I'm
exactly.
going to just bring home the complete opposite of all the things.
And talk about change. That was another change in my life, because I never thought that I would convert religions. I was not a very religious person, and I thought that was so silly. Why would somebody change a religion because of something a partner believes versus what I would believe? But when I was pregnant with our first child, my mother, who I think is a very wise woman, would say things like, even though you don't think it's an issue now, when you have children, it may become an issue. So it's better you decide something now. So then I decided to convert, and I converted to Judaism. So that was a whole nother change. Right. And first I converted in a Reform synagogue. Then years later, we joined a conservative synagogue, which had other things I needed to do to fulfill the conversion. Then I converted and was dipped in like a mikveh, like a holy bath. And then I So I converted again. And so those are lots of changes. And so there's also a little bit of a subtext, I think, not consciously, but subconsciously in my mind, that I defied all these traditions in choosing my partner. And so I better make it work.
Okay, this was a similar thing that was going on in my head. This is so fascinating for very different reasons, but similar bottom line. I, went against the whole grain.
Yes.
I brought home this bleached haired artist type, very loud, very big personality person, like the antithesis of what I'm sure
they would have picked
anybody.
For you.
Yes. Anybody was expecting there.
Yeah.
And so there was a part of me for a long time, certainly at different times along the way, that felt like I have to make this work. I have to prove that I didn't make a mistake, that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like there was all these layers of that weren't, like you said, they weren't conscious thoughts.
Yes.
But I was like, it sort of fed into this idea that like now it has to be forever.
Yes. Yes. Whatever that
Even
means.
if it's clearly not working for anybody.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean anybody.
Yeah.
It's not working across the board, but dang it, I'm going to make this work.
Force that peg in that circle or that.
Yes. I'm going to put this peg in that square hole. Whatever. I don't know. I'm terrible with expressions too.
I'm going to make that work. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, no, this is going to be fine.
Yes.
It's fine. And it was fine as long as I said yes to everything.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
The minute I said, I'm not doing that. It was not fine. It wasn't working.
But don't you also feel like, and this is maybe comes with age and perspective, I don't really regret any of that. I don't, in the sense like I enjoyed the journey of learning Judaism. I learned things through the marriage, even though it ultimately wasn't working for me. I learned things through the marriage and through the relationship, and but I'm still proud of myself that I could make that decision to not continue something that wasn't allowing me to be myself. But yes, the pressure to stay married is huge. And my mother will still, do you want to pack some food for Scott? And she wants to pack me food. And also I love his family, so I got that in the bargain.
Right.
But and she has some cognitive impairment, and she'll be like, what was so wrong with him? Nobody is perfect. And I was like, okay, fine, Mom. And then this morning I was at the dry cleaners, right? And I was picking up my things, and she goes, I haven't seen your ex-husband here. He just doesn't say ex-husband. I haven't seen him here. But he's also a good person. And so
like,
now
really?
the dry cleaner
oh my God.
is trying to help me bridge the gap now.
Oh, no.
and it's not too late. I could still.
You can still make this right.
Yes, no, this is what she said. He still loves you.
Oh, God.
That's what she said. He still loves you.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
And I was like, okay, I'm at the door, backing myself out of the door. I'm leaving. Okay, thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Like, no, really, I gotta go. Oh, my gosh.
I'm leaving now.
I don't know that I had a lot of that, thankfully.
Yes.
But so, it's funny because I don't regret. No, I mean, I think I had to grieve a lot.
Yes.
I spent like a year or more just in deep grief.
Yes.
Of the loss of myself.
Yeah.
The idea of a dream.
Yes.
Of growing old with somebody.
Yeah.
That I decided when I was 20 something I was going to grow old with. The loss of that. Mm-hmm. And all the ways in which I gave up on myself.
Mm-hmm. During the marriage, you mean? Giving up on yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then I had to just get real about some of the things that were going on there that I I couldn't push against. Like
Yeah.
I just had gotten into this groove that I was unwilling to stand up to those things.
Yes.
I mean, because
Yep.
the divorce wasn't even my idea, and I had to grieve even that.
Yes.
Like, why wasn't it your idea?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
didn't you say I'm done?
Push for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And but I was like, okay, well, it just wasn't there. I might have gotten there, but I wasn't
Yes.
there yet, and it
Yes.
took care of itself a different kind of way.
Yes.
And that's okay too. Like, the change happened that needed to happen.
Exactly.
Who cares now? So, like, yes, now,
Exactly.
like 5 years later, I can look back and go, who cares how I
Yes.
got here? I got here,
Yes.
and look what I'm doing now that I'm here. Woo,
Yeah.
go me, right?
Yeah.
But when I was in it,
Yep.
there were definitely times where I could not see that at
Yeah.
all, and it was
Yeah.
all just like, oh my God, what
Yeah.
did I do? I wasted blah, and it's just sort of like lots of self-pity,
Yes.
all those things that I think needed to come up and out.
Yeah. And I think, Hella, sometimes I do wonder if I had not had what I perceived as a near-death experience, maybe it would not have changed for me. I might
Right.
have stayed in that because the desire to keep an intact family is quite a big force.
Yeah.
And initially, for the first year at least, I was talking about the divorce as the most selfish thing I had done. That's how I was actually I was actually phrasing it like that. And I say selfish because he didn't want it. My kids didn't necessarily want it. Our families, my parents and his family, his parents had passed, but his siblings may not have wanted it. So it was purely in my interest. But I stopped that when I realized what a negative I was, what a lot of unnecessary burden I was putting on myself that was not fair. Because in life, what I find is so interesting is that we can choose to tell the story. We can choose to tell the story from whatever narrow scope we want.
Right.
Right? Like, I think the human brain, the vastness of existence is too much for our brain to comprehend. So we divide history, life, our own personal experiences, we divide it into segments. And so I was choosing to see the segment as from when I wrote that letter or I made that mental decision to now. And then saying that painted me in a selfish way. But if I chose to widen my lens and look at, say, from our wedding day on,
Right.
or even prior, our 1 or 2 years together before the wedding day on, it's not a selfish thing.
Right. Right. Right.
It was a brave thing.
Right.
And so I think I think we all choose to define, and that's what I think we do in history, what we do in our lives. People will pick the segment they want to, that helps justify whatever their perspective is and use it. That's why I love that expression that astronauts use called the overview effect, where
Ooh.
they're in space and they look down on the Earth and all they see is this one planet, not men and women, European or African or wealthy or poor. It's just one planet. And we are all on that planet, and we are all connected because of that unifying factor, if not other things. But so I think that again is then they have a perspective that most of us will never have, to physically be able to see how common we are. And maybe scientists see it because, like, geneticists see it because they see how we are all like 99.5% identical genetically.
They're like, listen, everybody, calm down, because actually you have no idea how much alike you really are.
Yes.
Well, it's what I find, it's funny because I've had not that many conversations yet as part of this, but I mean, there's some definite themes that are like consistently the same across this already, very different group of people.
Yes.
Then I'm like, and yet there's like these things that are like very much the same.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
It is fascinating.
On that note of the overview effect, I think that's a great place for us to stop for today. We're going to do a follow-up conversation about menopause.
Sounds great.
Because we did want to go into that. So we're going to have a separate session and talk about menopause from all the angles, including the medical side.
Perfect.
So, well, thank you so much for being here.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
And hanging out with me in the sunroom. Today it's very sunny.
It's very calming to be here, actually.
Aw, I'm so glad.
Soothing.
Well, maybe next time we can also have you come over. We can just come over and we'll have a cup of tea.
Okay. That sounds good.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Hella.
Bye. Thank you again for listening to The Stories That Sparkle, a space I created for women to tell in their own voices the intricacies of their stories and explore the very human complexity in themselves and, in the process, in myself. I did put the link to the Economist article that I reference, Why Gen X is the Real Loser Generation, in the show notes in case you want to read it. And I have one small correction. I said that the population of Winchester is at best 26,000 people. In fact, in 2024, the population of Winchester was captured at 28,734 people. So, it's growing. Anyways, thank you again for being here. Please rate, review, subscribe, follow, hang out with me on Substack, hellarator.substack.com. Share this podcast with someone you know. And if you have a story you want to tell, please drop me a line at hellarator@substack.com. Because together we bring light into dark places.